Perfect. Thank you all so much for joining us for this super sexy, fun session on the very important, I do not mean to make light, general facilities reports. This is just one of those like foundational documents that it's really important to have, and both Maggie and Mackenzie have a lot of experience putting these together. Mackenzie super generously pilfered the new AAM kind of templates for us. So I'm sharing those in the chat. But really quickly, I just wanted to give a few kind of unrelated updates and announcements. I know most of you are from our regular collections, Monday collections meetings. So apologies if you've heard this before. But let's let Groover and Joe in real quick. Couple of announcements. The annual History Awards nominations just opened, and I will share in the chat the link. You might be familiar with these awards: the David Douglas Award for like work on a project, the Governor's Award for teaching history, but we have a new award this year called Service to Local History, which is intended to recognize an exceptional volunteer at a local history museum or heritage organization. It's brand new. I kind of really pushed for this, so I'd love to see us get lots of great nominations, and I know you all have incredible volunteers working for your organizations. So give some thought about submitting an awards nomination. They're due February 24th, and then we'll have a big party in April, and we'd love to have you there. The other kind of things on the radar, February 7th will be in Olympia for Arts, Heritage, and Science Week. We'd love to have you join us for some workshops during the day on the 7th, kind of nitty-gritty stuff about public funding opportunities, some grants that are out there. We'll have some people talking about all of that. And then Senator Karen Frazier and Joseph Gavednik are going to do a session about advocacy and like kind of demystifying picking up the phone and calling your legislator, which we should all feel comfortable doing. And so kind of giving some tips on how to do some of that work. And then we're going to have a nice party in the evening at the Washington Center for the Performing Arts. It'll be a cash bar, but there will be free food. So come and hang out, and we'd love to have you. And then the last thing, since you're all our collections friends, I wanted to do just a super informal poll. I had a meeting yesterday with the Moving Images Preservation of Puget Sound nonprofit. I was totally unfamiliar with these folks. Mackenzie, I bet you know these folks, don't you? No? Amazing. I know. They were not on my radar at all, but they are a nonprofit based in Seattle that basically their mission is to help preserve analog media that are in the collections of heritage organizations just like yourselves. So they can both give you tips and advice on how to properly store and troubleshoot and take good care of old videotapes and things like that. And then they also provide digitizing services. So for a very reasonable rate, they can actually digitize analog materials for you. My hunch is that many of you have some of these materials in your collections and could use some information resources support. So just raise your hand if you think a program like this would be interesting for you. Cool. I think it's going to be like a hands-on kind of thing, because they do kind of an AV 101 session, which is just like identifying different types of media, and then some just tips and tricks. So we'll try and do it on the west side and the east side of the state. And anyway. And Anne, your question, we'll get to your question via email or at the next collections concerns. Okay, I'm done talking. I'm gonna let Mackenzie take it away. Hopefully all of you can see those facility report templates in the chat. I'll also attach them to my follow-up email to all of you. Joe, can you see those? You came in after I shared them. No, okay, I'll share them again. Perfect. I'll throw them in there right now. And great, okay, Mackenzie, thank you so much. Take it away.
So the General Facility Report was created by the American Alliance of Museums. It's been around for a long time. They've had a few different iterations of it. The most recent one, which you've got copies of now, was released in 2019, and it's not that different from the old one. It's a little, formatting's a little different, and I think they added, there's the long form and then there's a short form. And if your organization meets certain criteria, you can fill out this shorter, less scary form. But you have to be like, you can't be in an earthquake zone, you can't be in a floodplain, you can't be prone to wildfires. So most places are not they're gonna have to fill out the long form.
We can tell you all right now, not all of you are in those things. So don't don't ask us if you can use the short form. Sorry, go ahead, Mackenzie.
But I mean, even for me, the form's a little scary. There's just a lot of really very technical information about like your fire suppression systems, your security systems, very detailed measurements of like loading docks and all that. There's a lot of legwork if you don't already have one kind of set up, but you know, just work your way through it. There might be sections that just flat out don't apply to you, and that's okay. But it's a good way to kind of compile really important information into one document. It is a confidential, should be a confidential document. You don't let other people see it because it does have such detailed information about, you know, very important building systems and processes. So it's used by other organizations. Like if you're trying to borrow an object or something from another organization, the general facilities report is used as a way for them to assess approving that loan, or, you know, to prompt additional questions that they might have about how the object will be cared for while it's at your institution. In my experience, most of the time, if we're repeat borrowers from one organization, they'll kind of only ask for it once, and then once we've got a good relationship established with them, depending on the size of the organization, they won't ask for it every time we ask for a loan, because they know us and they know our systems and everything. It's very intense, but it's a good thing to have. You're probably gonna have a lot of questions once you actually get through looking at it, but just do your best, and we're always here to help. Maggie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, right before this, Mackenzie and I were talking about how much experience both of us have had with this. And she's been really fortunate to come into institutions that already have one made. I have not been that lucky in my career. So I have definitely been in your shoes if you don't have one, making one from the ground up. And a lot of the time when you're in that situation, you have to ask a lot of other people for information because it's not things you know, right? It's sometimes if you're attached to a city, you actually are probably going to have to ask someone within the city to provide you part of this information. And usually once people realize what you're doing and how important it is as a core document of your organization, because that's how you really want to think about it. This is a core document of your organization. They'll happily help you. And sometimes the questions you can ask them are really easy for them to answer, but just really hard for us because it's not in our wheelhouse. So in my experience, it's really great to ask questions of lots of people. And it's actually a good thing to kind of sit down and, you know, there are things that your director will know that you won't know, right? There will be people in your organization that will have pieces of this. It's also, it gets down to kind of the nitty-gritty too of who is the contact person in case of emergencies, right? So it prompts kind of those conversations that you might already be having. Or it's a good way to open those conversations if you haven't had the chance to do it. I can tell you how important it really is to look at filling one out. And again, if you look at it and you're like, Maggie, I'm not ever doing that. We can have a one-on-one session with either me or Mackenzie and we can help, right? Like we're happy to do things like this because it's a core document for yourselves. I'm going to give you an example, right? to kind of try and solidify this, I'm not going to use any names, right? But we were asked for a loan. We were asked for a loan of a territorial artifact that is one of a kind. Okay, there's no way we can ever find this again. Right? Great provenance, like known person, like key piece in the collection. It's a hardier piece than some of the other pieces, but we were asked for the loan by an organization who hadn't done this paperwork. And they asked if they didn't have to do it and we could just say, like, you're going to be fine, right? Maggie can come check on this occasionally. We can't legally do that because we could lose our accreditation with the American Alliance of Museums if we do. So we can't say, oh, we only answer the first 2 questions, right? Like we legally can't do that and take your loan request seriously. We want to help all of you, right? If you are having a special event and you want us to bring a piece out, we want to help you with that, right? We want to think outside of the box with you. So maybe you can't have something on permanent display, but maybe we can come if you're going to have a special thing happening, or it can be there for a little bit of time, right? We can work with you on that, but without this core piece of documentation about your institution, we can't even have the conversation. Legally, Mackenzie and I have to ask that the first thing. That's the first thing we have to ask you, is if you could send us that. The next question we have to ask you is if you could send, so just so you're aware, usually these forms are paired with temperature and humidity readings from your gallery space. Usually you have to send it together. There have also been different names for this form. So someone, if it's been a while since they've looked at one of these, they might ask you for a standard facility report, a complete facility report. So as long as the word facility report is in there, you're going to know this is what they're talking about. I would also take advantage of the fact that we're sharing the document with you, the new one, because they're charging for it now and we're mad and we want you to all have it for free. So take it, share it, right? Share the document out with people. But it gets really nitty gritty and we realize that. We realize it isn't sexy. I mean, Allison wasn't lying. Like they want to know what building materials your building is made out of, right? Like it gets down to that kind of detailed information. But it is a really core document to your organization. Okay, there's a question in the chat.
Yeah, really quickly. Yes. And so if another organization asks to see your general facilities report, this is the exact form, just with your information plugged in, that they'll want to see. So this is one of those cases where we do have a very concrete, like literally cut and paste into this document template. It'd be great if we had one of these for all the other core documents that we should have. But Maggie, also, if you could just briefly make the case for some of our organizations who don't frequently seek out loans, why should they care about this document if that's not sort of part of their practice?
No, I think that's a really great question. The nice thing about it is when you have all of it together, it's a really great resource to look information up in that, you know, at a glance, it's at your fingertips. If someone asks you a question on there, you can go in there and get it right away. I don't do that as often here because I can say, Mackenzie, right? I can ask Mackenzie to go look up that information for us. But when I was at a smaller organizations, I used it all the time because it was a great place to know where every single piece of information, especially while I was working at a facility that was owned by the county, but was remote. We were a county building, but we were not next to any other county building, right? I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but I didn't have someone I could just say, hey, can you come over and do this for me? If I was having an emergency happen, right? Like this is the person that you would call, like this is what we do, and this is who we contact, and I can answer exactly what they need from this one document. So I can't encourage you more if you're a smaller organization to have it as a tool that you can use at your disposal. And yeah, we would love to work with you. So if you want a loan from Swimwear, we can help you get there, right? Like we want to help you get there. The second stage to this is if you don't already use temperature and humidity monitoring equipment, it's not that expensive anymore. And there are grants that love to pay for things like this. So we can help you kind of in a two-part way with this, right? We can help you with this very core document and we can help you really meet all of the guidelines for loans in Washington. And again, like Mackenzie said, once you're in with people, it's really easy to do. MoHi doesn't even charge us anymore. Like, we're really lucky. we work with them a lot, right? So it's one of those where we try really hard to, because we all want to help each other, right? We want our collections to go out into your communities. We would love to have your collections come to our community, right? Like, we all want to make that happen. And this document is sort of the first key for y'all to make the case for that.
I would also assume
we can't just skip, right? We're not legally allowed to just skip it. Go ahead, Allison, sorry.
I would just also, you know, we talk a lot about emergency planning and preparedness. We're hoping to do better work about supporting everyone and getting more prepared. But this document, if you can fill this out, as much of this information out as you can, it's basically the equivalent of the pocket response plan, which we talk a lot about. It's going to, if for no other reason to have this document, when you are in a panic because a toilet has overflowed in your collection space, or there's a wildfire in your region, or whatever has happened, there's flooding, you can just grab this one document and it'll have contact information and it'll be able to tell your first responders where the exits are, you know, just kind of, yeah. So if that alone helps you sleep better at night, then that's why we should care about this document.
And I guess Mackenzie and I both want to reiterate to everybody that there's no question too big or too small about this. We realize it's complicated, right? We realize it's not the easiest form you've ever filled out, and that we really do want to be a resource for you all about it.
So I don't know if you guys wanted to walk through any piece of it, or I guess one question I would have for you is, if I've never seen this document before, I've already gone through and filled out all the information I know, like what pieces, and now I'm got to do some legwork to start tracking down information. Like, how do I prioritize? Like, what do you think is the most important chunks to start with in this document? Does that question make sense? Or it's all important and just suck it up and start on page 1?
Yeah, and Mackenzie, feel free to jump in, right? Whenever you want. Yeah, I mean, really, you need to know the composition of exactly what your building is made of, right? That's hard for a lot of institutions to have to just know that off the top of their head. It's going to take some asking. When I've had to do it myself before, I looked at it as, okay, I'm going to do the information that I know, and then I'm going to look at the one I don't know much about at all. What's the thing I don't know anything about, and who can I ask that question to, and start delegating out that right, the request for that information. Because remember, you're not going to have everything in this document in your head. I don't, right, about our organization, and neither does Mackenzie. So it's really thinking about who can help you with this document. It's confidential in the sense that you don't have to share it with people, but if they're your colleagues, right, sometimes having them help, you can actually say, can you fill out this section for me? This is you, right? This is what you do. But we're also happy to help you, right? Anything you ask us for help with would stay confidential, right? If that's something that you would like us to do. And again, we're happy to work one-on-one with you. Ruthie, did you have a question? I saw your hand go up.
I did have a question. Is there one section or a couple of sections that are particularly problematic for people? I mean, I think it would be useful to pick one and maybe give us examples of where things get tripped up or complicated.
I would say for me, the most complex questions are about like your fire suppression systems and like what type they are, where they are, when are they triggered, and all that. It could be simple for your buildings, but oh my God, our building. But we have a facilities person that who knows all of that information. So, you know, that for me, that's like, I don't know what I'm reading here. What does this mean? Explain it to me, Mark.
Yeah, and would you, Mackenzie, would you have this, so for sites like Ruthie's or like for folks who have offsite collection storage, would you have a separate facilities report for every building, basically,
So it's
where
really
collections are?
it's really only where the loaned item would be. There are questions about whether you have an off-site, like receiving or storage area where the loaned items will be. But if they're not going to be there, then it's not, you don't need to include it.
But for our other kind of intended purposes for this document, if you do have offsite storage, it might be really useful
Yeah.
to go through the practice of creating a document for that too. I can
Because you can
see.
ask people about both at the same time, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
again, people are going to want to help you with this. Now, I realize that people don't have the type of fire suppression that we do. So is there a section that you all are like, ooh, can you walk us through this one?
Probably not, because they're seeing it for the first time, most of them.
And again, it's okay. If there's something you want us to walk through, though, that's okay.
I think what a lot of this is too is sort of a lot is connected to some work that we've been meaning to do around kind of risk assessment, which I think would be a great other training to do with maybe some folks from the state or from some of our counties. You know, obviously Angela out at Wanapum is going to have different kind of risk issues than us here in Tacoma, and some the same, right? As far as environmental dangers. So it's making me think that that's an area that we can do some stuff. Yeah. So Angela, yeah, a couple of you are saying you've done them at bigger institutions. It's hard to know what it looks like for a smaller. I think too, again, if you're not planning to ask for a big giant loan from a big giant museum, the best practice would be to fill out as much of this as you can and is relevant to your organization. And nobody's going to expect every single line to be complete. That will still be useful to you, and in a moment of crisis, it will still be very useful. The question about like, yeah, I do imagine, Angela, this is one of those things that is kind of on people's to-do list for a while, because it is time consuming to track all of this down. And it's almost, if it's not something that you need tomorrow, right, then it's one of those things that it's easy to put at the bottom of the to-do list. But I imagine, yeah, exactly, back burner, yeah. But I think that, you know, just getting one under your belt, and then the question about updating it, you're gonna, once you're familiar with the document, I think you'll have a strong sense of when things change and need to be updated. The challenge, I'd imagine, and I'm looking around this room and I know all of you have been at your organizations for a very long time, but when there's sort of staff turnover, I can imagine this document being really useful in kind of onboarding new people as well, but there needs to be some intention around kind of handing this document off and probably physically walking the new person through that building so that they can see and connect all the things that are on this piece of paper with the actual in real life structure. Yeah, I don't know, Maggie, do you guys have a process for like a calendar reminder once a year to take a look at this, or do you just kind of update as needed?
I think it's mainly revolves around staff changes. We just got the new form. We just got the new form. Like we just realized there was a new form because we had to go back because we're asking the National Archives for a loan, right? And they're very picky. So we had to like, is there something that we didn't know about that we need to do? So we actually just did the new form ourselves. And it took Mackenzie longer than she was anticipating to fill it out, which is fine, right? Like, just so you know, like she was like, oh, I thought this was going to be easier than it is, right? So we had that conversation internally about the new form too. So yeah, I do think it definitely comes up every time you want to ask for something, but when you do have staff changes is kind of the best time to really look at it. But it is a great idea to have a calendar reminder of like, it is maybe a yearly thing that you.
Well, a
can-
lot of this stuff probably doesn't change that frequently. I mean, you're not
It
moving
doesn't.
collections from one building to another. So I don't
Mhm.
know that it requires, I'm also imagining as y'all kind of spend some time with this, there's going to be some questions about like, are framed works hung on a weight rated hooks, and you're going to be like, what the heck does that mean, right? I know we've talked about hanging art a little bit, but I think that our Monday monthly sessions will be a great place to bring any specific questions that come up about like just secure to the surface of the display case. How do I secure this thing or whatever? So definitely stay looped into our Mondays, or shoot Maggie or Mackenzie, but it might emerge that there are some big gaps in kind of information out there around aspects of this that we can just plan a whole nother session on, or we can do a hands-on training, or we can because there's going to be stuff here that maybe it's asking if you do it and you didn't even know you were supposed to be doing it. And that kind of stuff. So just communicate with us as you kind of work through this. If things are like, I have never heard of this before, what does this even mean? We can help out.
And Allison bringing up the risk assessment is really great to think about. I
Yeah.
had to do a tabletop exercise on the state level a couple of months ago. And it was a situation where I was the person from the museum who had to attend, because they gave us real life scenarios of disasters and we had to respond, how we would respond. If we go down that, let's have a risk assessment, someone talk, they're probably going to suggest that we do something like that, maybe just for us, as a great way to like think about like what part of this document would be helpful, what part of the pocket guide would be helpful, right? It would give some, it really clarified for me, oh, if that happens, weird. Wow. Like,
I mean, I'm looking at all of you and I'm pretty sure flooding, you are all in areas with flooding risks. Yeah, Joe's laughing, and Catherine, I know, right? Sharon, I'm sure you guys out there have flooding issues. I don't know, Angela, does that river ever get too close to you?
Well, we're a backwater, so I feel like
Yeah.
we're already above the flooding, the older
Yeah.
flooding level.
Wildfire is
Because we're
probably a
behind the
bigger
dam.
concern
We
for
got
y'all.
fires,
Yeah. Oh gosh. Ugh. It
We've
gives me
had
the willies just thinking about it. What was that, Sharon?
we've had flooding in the basement of the
Yeah.
museum. It's more
Yeah.
seepage than actual river flow.
Yeah.
That was fun to try to bail out.
Yeah, I bet. And Anne, at Moses Lake, probably wildfires, your biggest concern. Yeah. Which of course fire brings water damage, right? Because you need water to put out the fire. So those issues kind of go hand in hand. Anne in Skagit County was suggesting this for a WAMA session. Maybe I can get somebody from emergency management to just do a kind of like, this is what a risk assessment looks like, and these are the questions you should be asking. Yeah, Angela, there's a link in the document for the USGS. I was noticing that as a child from the land of earthquakes, I I have the USGS app on my phone, and that's sad. But I do think you're going to have to like get comfortable going to some of those government websites that show the specific earthquake zones. Gosh, I'd be curious to know. We certainly are here in Tacoma. I don't know about you, Angela. And then fire zones. That's one where I don't know that I've seen a map.
Yeah, there should be links to almost everything you need. And again, if you want a second set of eyes, Mackenzie and I are happy to be that for you. Like, hey, can you just double check that this is really where we are? We have a sinkhole in our parking lot, right? Like none of us.
Well, and we have a train. We have a train that goes by our facility all day long. And the Museum of Glass is right on the other side. And it didn't even occur to me that trains derail. They've been known to do that. And I know at the Museum of Glass, that's like their #1 risk assessment. It's not Mount Rainier blowing. It's not the Cascadian subduction fault going. It's the train that goes by all day. And what if it's carrying toxic chemicals or whatever. I literally see this train out my window and it had not occurred to me. So it does sometimes take a second set of eyes to walk around. And I know we're doing work here in Pierce County, and I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing me talk about it, but we're really hoping to find opportunities to connect you all with other organizations in your region to kind of work together on some of this emergency management stuff. We're about to get Pierce County off the ground. Spokane's working on it. Seattle's already got a great like cultural emergency response network. But these are exactly the kinds of things that we're going to be doing, is trying to get you all connected to your local, y'all should have your local emergency management teams from the county, from the city out to visit your facilities, because if something goes down, you kind of want them to already have a sense of what they're dealing with. Like, oh, there's only one way in and out of this basement, but there's really important collections materials in this basement, so we're gonna have to to deal with that, or whatever
And
it
they'll
is.
love coming. We have a really sensitive fire system, and we had like a heat sensor go off, and the 2 fire trucks came, and they were like, "Oh, we have to clear the building. We have to have a tour of the entire building to clear it," right? Because they wanted to come in and see what we had, and they loved it. And they remember us, and they know right when they were here, they checked where the lockbox keys were if they ever needed to get in. And
Yeah.
so it is really great to invite them in, because they're really curious, right? They're really curious about what y'all have. And they would rather do it when it's not, our team tripping the alarms. So it is a great suggestion and idea, because they really do want to be of help, and they're really interested in everything that you're doing already.
How often do you think you should do that? Like, we've done that before, but it's probably been a few years now.
Yeah, and it's good to check to see if like who the fire captain is that you're local that would come to you, and if there's a change in that position, right? It's good to have people back, but probably every few years is fine, right? As we have a pretty robust program here, but we have a nitrate chamber, right? Like, we have things that they have to come check on more often. So it's kind of built into what we're already having to do. But if that's not something you'll have, I would suggest every couple of years, and really just trying to see if right, which
When there's
station would
turnover.
come, like who it is, and if there's turnover there, it's helpful for everybody just to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And they really get excited. And then the people who are still in the truck are like, but we want to come in too, right? Like, they sort of argue about who gets to come in. so if you invite them, they'll be excited about that. And
Ruthie,
they might be able to help answer questions too, right? If you have specific fire questions, you could probably just call them and say, hey, we're filling out this form. Can you help us with this part? And they'd be happy to.
Ruthie, when there's like a house fire or something on Shaw Island, do emergency responders come over from Orcas, or like what does that even look like?
There's a very small group of all volunteers. So it is a vulnerability for sure. There's
Have
not
they
a lot
been
of
out to
support.
visit the preserve yet? Have you had them out?
Well, it's interesting, because I have been planning to meet with the EMS person, because they happen to use the property if they have to evacuate somebody by boat, if aircraft can't get in. So they utilize the dock on the preserve property, but also, and there's also a special large contraption that you can hook into the pond to draft water, and it's a very high flow one, so that there is a good water source close to the buildings. And so I've been thinking about this lately, and trying to figure out how to wrangle the people that are in charge. That also changes often.
Yeah.
And so I think having a rapport before there's a disaster happening is super important, because they, in the heat of whatever might be going on, some really crazy decisions can be made. And if they're not willing to look you in the eye or consult with you before somebody takes a chainsaw to a wall or whatever, they're thinking about one thing, but there might be another approach that would
Wow.
not cause as much damage. And so somebody on your team that's advocating for this space and what's in it has to have their a rapport and their respect, I think, before that happens.
Yeah, that relationship building is really important. And I know this wasn't intended to be kind of a session about emergency preparedness, although
It all ties into
it
each other.
and we should always be talking about this all the time in my mind. You know,
Well,
I know oh, go ahead, Ruthie.
Well, I just have a question about that
Sure.
that I wrote down. So we're talking about a general facilities report, but also we're touching on disaster preparedness
mhm.
and emergency preparedness, and also risk assessment. And then I love the little comment about a pocket response plan.
Yeah.
So this seems like a suite of things that are somewhat interrelated. But is there sort of, would the general facilities report be kind of the top tier? I'm trying to visualize how to have these things make sense without having, and being sure everything is covered without getting so bogged in documents. So any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I would say, and Maggie and Mackenzie may think differently. The pocket response plan, which I will share out with everybody, the link if you haven't seen it, it's just literally one page, which with a lot, I mean, it asks all these same questions, right? Like, it's the basics, like who is your insurer and like who's the local whatever emergency management people. Just so it's the idea is that you have all the contacts. It has all the contacts for your staff and your in one place, and then it does ask questions about your general facility. Yep, it's literally one page, and it's you print it on Tyvek paper and you keep it in a little sleeve and you can kind of have it with you. And the idea is if you're at home, you get a phone call in the middle of the night that something has happened at your museum, you kind of have all this information on you, right? At all times. My sense is that the general facilities report includes all of that same information and more. And so if you are able to really dig in, you know, this having the general facilities report kind of X's out the need for the pocket response plan. And this is a document that should be in your binder, which has all of your, whatever your other emergency prep materials are, which we can do a whole nother session on, like what you should, the inventory of your, you know, rapid response kits, the big trash can you might have that has latex gloves and, you know, whatever the diaper stuff is, it sucks up water and all of those Mylar and acid-free paper and whatever, all that stuff. And we've done trainings on that in the past, but not really since the pandemic. So we're overdue for doing more. And I know Mackenzie is super knowledgeable about all of that. So I don't know, what do you think, Maggie and Mackenzie? I don't think you would need a pocket response plan and a general facilities report.
I will note that the general facilities report asks if you have an emergency plan.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I wouldn't say anything is more important than another. It's an emergency response plan might be more of an immediate need if you don't have one already sort of in place. I'm not sure if the pocket response plan would qualify as like a, yes, I have one for the.
To me, the pocket response plan is not actually a emergency response or
Right,
disaster
yeah.
response plan. It's just like a Rolodex on a piece of paper.
Right.
But it's better than nothing.
Yeah, and it depends on how you use it. Ours at Janum in LA, because everyone in California was switching over to this too, and it did count there as your plan. Ours had a map on it.
Yeah, I've
So
seen that.
you could point out to first responders where they needed to go. Like it was really like you really thought about the space and what you wanted on it, because we all had them on the back of our badges. They were taped in Tyvek sleeves to the back of our badges. So it's attached to your keys. And if you have a fire, you can pull it out, right? And show everybody all the things. And these are all the numbers to call. So yeah, like Mackenzie said, they're kind of two different things, but very related to each other. And if you all, like in Ruthie's example, and I think Joe and Ann are in the same situation, you all kind of have a parent organization, either a county, a city, or oh, you're not part of the county.
They
Joe?
just
For some
get
reason,
IT help. They
You
don't
just
get.
get IT help. You don't. Oh, if you are attached to a group, they will have a lot of the information that you need for this already somewhere else. You just have to gather that information from.
Yeah, and at Moses Lake has the city, right? So
Yep.
they own those buildings, right? And then
Yep.
Angela, you've got the PUD, I guess. I just wanted to tell you, I bought you all presents, and I just need to figure out how to get them to you. But I have a box of 50 what are called salvage wheels. This will help you sleep better. This is like something you can stick on the filing cabinet in your office or at home. Probably better to have it at home. And it's like, okay, something just flooded, and it's furniture in my historic house, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, this is a disaster. I don't even know where to start. And it says, oh, wood furniture. Rinse sponge surfaces gently to clean, blot, air dry slowly. Like, it gives you like your first steps in that moment of panic when everything has gone wrong. And then it has a phone number for the National Heritage Response Team, which are people, experts who are like by the phone, ready to help you. So anyway, I can't wait to give you all those. Well, I'll sleep better at night. Yeah. So this has been a little bit meandering, and I bet you have questions. Anne, yeah, go ahead, Anne.
I was gonna say, just because we're with the city,
Yeah.
doesn't mean this report's any easier to fill out, because here I am, the little girl in collections who have these questions, and they're like, why? We don't have time for this. What are you,
Yeah.
why are you
Okay,
bothering us?
Okay, Ann, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
So-
do that for you. I
So it
never
doesn't make it
want that.
easier.
Okay.
It doesn't make it
okay.
easier. I mean, yes, the questions are answered. It's just trying to get people to realize it's important that we
Yeah.
at the museum need to know. So
Yeah.
And I can give you all an example that is scary, if it's helpful. I have been someone who was hired to come back in after a museum went through a natural disaster. They evacuated their collections due to fire, and they didn't do it properly, and they lost their accreditation with the American Alliance of Museums over their handling of their disaster. And when I was hired to get it back for them, and when I called AAM and talked to it, they laughed at me, because there's no coming back from that. So you need this is why this is important, right? There are lots of examples because it's really hard to get back if you lose your accreditation status. And I know it was because they didn't have any plans in place, and it was really bad. So the more you can do, even if it's just rudimentary things to make sure you feel prepared, the better, because it's true how interconnected it is, right? Like all of these pieces of paperwork we're talking to you about are really interconnected with each other.
So I think we should let folks sit with this document and kind of take a glance. And again, some pieces of it are going to be, you're going to know off the top of your head, and some things like you're going to have to be bugging the facilities person at Moses Lake Parks and Rec to try and track this down or whatever, nagging people. And then there's going to be some of it that you just don't understand because it's not, applicable to your facility or your collection or your organization. But go forth, noodle, do what you can. Email us with any hiccups or any questions, and we can make sure we spend a few minutes at all of our collections office hours, just answering any questions that come up about this specifically, because I'm sure if one of you has a question, probably other people are thinking the same thing. And I know that all of our organizations are different shapes and sizes and different governance structures and different, collections focuses and all of that. So it's not one size fits all. I also, I'm going to put everybody on the spot. How many of you think you'll be able to get to Yakima for the WAMA conference in June? Not Anne. Oh, I'm sorry, Anne. Okay, because I'm trying to think of ways that we can maximize. Maybe Catherine? Yeah, I know. It's hard to get away. Ways that we can kind of like maximize our time together and maybe do some like more intense emergency response training and maybe get something like that together. Ooh, Catherine's, your screen is freaking out. And
I
okay,
don't know why it's doing that. I apologize.
it looks like we're having a dance party all of a sudden.
I'm so sorry. Geez, I have no idea why it's doing that. My apologies.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. But the other thing is these are going to be great questions if you're able to come on any of our collections tours, which we have scheduled in April. We're going to be visiting our collection in Tacoma and going to visit Anne and Moses Lake and going to visit our colleagues at the Northwest MAC. These are good questions for them about, like, let's ask the MAC what, do you have a general facilities? We can put them on the spot. They're up for it. And as we go through this together, if there are places we're having trouble, let's ask them what they do. So really, we can all kind of work on these things together. And but I'm glad that we were able to get this document in your hands, these forms in your hands, and we're just here to support you as you work through it. I will send an email. I'll share a couple of other things, pocket response plan. I'll share some other just general emergency response links and stuff, just to make sure that, I'm sure you've seen all this stuff before, but just so you have it handy in case you want to go down that rabbit hole. And we will be thinking on what other kind of trainings and support we can provide beyond the general facilities report and going more into that kind of risk assessment, emergency management realm, because it's an area that we're thinking a lot about. So, okay.
Well,
Awesome.
and
Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for even thinking about doing this. Right? We know how daunting it is. And so just thanks for looking at the form and thinking about it, because it's a big deal to even add that to your plates, right? So just thank you for that.
And something is better than nothing. If you
Mhm.
can, if you can just collect a third of this information, you're better off than most folks and moving in the right direction. So I hope that nobody feels too overwhelmed and like you've got to check every single box, because that's just not realistic for every organization. So okay. Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie and Maggie. Lovely to see you guys always. And we'll be gathering for, I don't know what the date is, for our collections concerns at 10 o'clock on February 13th. So I'll send an email reminder to everybody about that. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Was that okay? I know this is a not sexy one, so.
No, it is. It's okay. And I think really what we wanted to do is get them the form. I'm sure.
Well,
I think maybe. I think maybe like oh wait, let me stop recording. Hang on. I always do that.